Anyone have a long week?
Yeah,
Unfortunately.
Yeah, tell me about it. You know, it's like, it's just, I don't know. Like there's weeks that just feel long, aren't there? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Yet you don't get anything done too, so you feel.
So then you're behind, and it's long.
So you're behind for next week too. So just to encourage you, this week is going to be terrible too.
Oh.
That feels good.
No, it's true. I think a lot of things are frustrating. Sometimes, like you don't get stuff done that you like. And those of you who work on cars, like you ever work on a car, and you're trying to fix it, and whatever you fixed didn't seem to fix the problem that needed fixing. And then it's like you have to buy more parts and put more labor. And if it's like your only vehicle, which was often in my case, we had one car. And I'd be out in the snow when we lived in Maine, underneath it at night, you know, working on it. And once you bought the parts and got there, you kind of had to get it going because you're kind of stuck there. And then it didn't work, and you're like, I'm stuck. I only have one car. It's in the snow, and I didn't have a garage. Still don't have a garage. But you know, there's things that are tough, and there's times at work when you work, and you do everything you can at your job. And like the other guy still gets promoted, right? Don't you hate that? Or like you work really hard and you just have to do your coworker who slacks. You have to do the fill in for them and do the rest of their work that they didn't get done. Or I think like I've been coaching wrestling for a long time, and you know there's times where you work really hard, you do all the right things, and you still lose the wrestling match. You know, and there's a lot of things that in life are frustrating. And today we're going to talk about a guy who I think was probably frustrated. He tried everything he could do, and it still wasn't working out. And Jesus runs into him. And in John chapter 5, we read this. It says, afterward, Jesus returned to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish holy days. And inside the city near the sheep gate was the pool of Bethsaida with 5 covered porches. Crowds of sick people, blind, lame, or paralyzed, lay on the porches, and one of the men lying there had been sick for 38 years. It's the holy days, so they're there for a big feast. It'd be kind of like Christmas or Easter. Like, you might go to church periodically, but you're going to definitely make it for the big holidays, and so that's kind of it. So the whole place would have been a little more packed than normal. Because there was a festival, everyone's in town for it if they weren't far away. Some people might be traveling in from far away because they wanted to celebrate it there. It's kind of, there's this big anticipation for things. You know, people didn't want to miss it. And a place called Bethesda. Now, that name probably sounds familiar to some of us, right?
Right.
Bethesda, anyone? Medical center maybe. You know, it's this name because it means house of mercy. And so we've kind of, Beit means house, and anyway, but it's a place of healing, and there's this. It's kind of interesting because it's there by the sheep gate, which it's kind of funny because it's like where the sheep would have come in for the slaughter for different things for you know the fact that this is like the temple place, so it would be the gate there, and there's this pool there, and they decide, I guess that's where the sick people decide this would be a cool place to hang out. And it says 5 porches in this translation. Some translations say porticos. I don't know about you, like my grandparents had 1 porch. Apparently they had 5. And they were just basically these giant covered places that people would lay around if they were sick. And you kind of picture, with it being a feast, probably if you didn't lay there all the time, this is like the big day you'd come in because people are potentially out, like we would do, like we do, the Salvation Army guys, they always go out during the Christmas season because people are in a good mood, they want to give, it's a good time to collect. So it's kind of that, maybe it'd be a good place to lay too as people come to the temple, they give me something. So I'm picturing like a lot of people there. And I like how John, honestly, he gives lots of details. It's kind of funny. Like, if you just read those details at first, you're like, what? It's all these intricate details. And they actually, in archaeology, when we start studying this, it kind of proves the veracity, the truthfulness of the Bible, because we find all these things. And for years, the people are like, oh, this doesn't exist. And then they're digging around, and they're like, oh, look, here it is. So it does. And so we found all these things. And it's all this detail. It's kind of like if I picture it, if you were to go tell a story about today, you'd be like, well, you have to go downtown on Lockerbin. And it's across from 33 West, down this little alley, into like tiny vestibule, and that's how you get to us, right? Right? It's all these details, and that's kind of just how I'm picturing it with John. And so now, verse 4. Those of you, could someone, anyone who's got a regular Bible out, could you read verse 4 to me? Someone want to read verse 4? And they'll put it up here on the screen for a second.
There's no verse 4.
Yeah.
There's no verse. I was looking at the
Is that weird? Like, are the people just really bad at numbering? Like 1, 2, 3, 5. I went to preschool and now I'm numbering the Bible. And it's funny because this is a little side sermon. But we mentioned this. Occasionally it comes up. What happens is sometimes there's these verses that got added later to the Bible. But when we numbered it, it had this. And so verse 4, it says, something to the effect, you probably have a footnote if you have a Bible. It'll say that angels stirred the water. And what it really, it's alluding to this belief that like angels came down and like, apparently angels, I don't know what they were doing, but they just thought they'd stir the water. And the thought was, whoever got in the water first got healed. Which is bad if you were paralyzed and you were second in. Oh. Because then you might drown because you can't swim. That's bad. But it's really, this is kind of the reason, this wasn't originally in the text. Sometimes things like this get added because they were kind of like little marginal notes or a note a scribe would put in. I hate to say this, I know we probably got someone who loves King James. King James, great translation for 1611, but it wasn't based on the best text. So the modern translations kind of put it to the footnote to go, hey, we know. And I think part of the reason is this is not, and there's no big theological issues with the verses that get chopped. So if somebody corners you on the street, I love my friends who are King James only. We have a common friend who's super King James only, and I love to just tick them off and annoy them and mess with them. Because that's pretty much, if I like you, I will tick you off, mess with you, and annoy you. If I'm not ticking you off, messing with you, or annoying you, I might not like you. No, I'm kidding. I might just not have found the thing that could tick you off. But it's kind of, I think of this as kind of like an urban legend. Now, you guys realize you can't trust everything on the internet, right?
Internet never lies.
Abraham Lincoln said you can't believe everything you read on the internet.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. That's my favorite.
Internet never lies.
And it's kind of like this. It was this kind of story. It's what people believe, but it wasn't true. And I get frustrated. Honestly, I love you guys, and you guys are all great. It's the other people who aren't here. But I read things people post. And I used to try to correct them all, and now it's just there's so much out there that's wrong. I'm like, I can't, I'm just gonna stamp Snopes on your thing. Just go, and it's like there's all these kind of half truths, and that's kind of what this is. It was this legend, it was this idea that this would happen, but it's really not based in truth. If it was, like we'd be like lining up at the pool today, right?
Right.
And what it was it was actually spring fed. So occasionally it would kind of gurgle and move, and so this thing develops. But anyway, the guy is sitting there for 38 years. Now, who here is 38 or older? A couple of us. But a lot of us, it would be like your entire life. Like, that's a long time. Now, we don't know how old this guy is, but he's been laying there for 38 years. Life expectancy, probably around 40 in those days. He's been laying there for like almost the life expectancy of some people's lives. And so, it's, if I get a cold for like a week, I complain, don't I? You guys know, some of you. How are you feeling? If everyone ever sprain an ankle or something?
Oh, yeah.
And you're like, I had to wear crutches for a week. That's a bad thing. But this is 38 years not being able to walk. And so when Jesus saw him, and he knew he had been ill for a long time, he asked him, would you like to get well? Yeah. that seems like a strange question on all kinds of levels.
No, I like
I know, I like myself way
No, I like just chilling here by the pool. You know, maybe that's it. He's by the pool, right? I mean, who doesn't want to chill by the pool? Maybe it's like, right.
working on my team.
And, I mean, think about this, because if you've read this, you've kind of heard it, and you don't really think about it. But it would be like, and I know I joke a lot, but I'm being serious with this one. This would be very obnoxious. If there was like somebody in a wheelchair, and you walked up to him and said, hey, have you ever thought of like learning to run?
Oh.
Like, oh my gosh. Like, I mean, you should get slapped. If that person can't slap you, I'll slap you next to him. That's rude.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, you're almost like, what do you mean? Like, why would you ask this guy? But I think some of it sometimes is, I think people like their brokenness. You get used to it. I posted something on the web or the Facebook thingy this week. It said, don't let your struggle become your identity. And sometimes I think we don't really want to get well. And I don't know if that's why Jesus asked us to build this anticipation. But the man replies, I can't, sir, for I have no one to put me in the pool when the water bubbles up. Someone else always gets there ahead of me. So the water bubbles up. It was that legend that angels did this, and if you first one in the pool got it, second one was in real trouble. And so because he was a paralytic, it's a lot harder to get in the pool, right?
Right.
Like the guy with like a bad finger, I mean, he's getting right in. It's
Right.
Guy with one bad foot, he can kind of hobble in there. The guy who can't walk, it's a struggle. And so he's doing everything. He's saying, I have no one to help me. Now this is a funny story for a second if you think about who he's talking to.
Right.
Like, we know from other stories, Jesus heals people, right?
Right.
So he's like telling people, I have no one can help, to the one guy who can't help. It's kind of like Undercover Boss. You ever watch that show?
Oh my
Yep.
goodness, it is.
I love that show. Sometimes it frustrates me. I just timing. I haven't been able to watch it lately. But I love when someone's complaining and they're like, well, only if management knew we could do this and it would be so much more efficient. Or only if management knew how hard it is when they do this to us. And it's always funny because you're laughing because you're like, that's your boss. That's your boss. And then it's funny also when someone says like they're a terrible worker. Who cares? I hate this company. And you're like, oh, you're getting fired. But it's kind of like this. This is like Undercover Boss, Jerusalem edition. And so Jesus is there, and he's complaining, hey, no one can help me. And I kind of wonder, was the guy frustrated? Had he given up? And he just kind of like, it's not going to happen anymore. Kind of like penguins. I'm sure they tried to fly at first. They just kind of swim in water. I mean,
Yeah.
they got wings. I can't try.
Then they were like, hey, I'm better at this.
Or like coaching wrestling, I think it's interesting because some kids they've lost so much, like so many times. It's just they can't win. Because in their head, they're just like, I'm going to go out there and be defeated. And I was at the tournament this weekend, and I saw some kids get beat that you're like, yeah, you just never thought you had a chance, and therefore you didn't have a chance. And as a coach, I was always so excited. I had this one guy, I coached him for a really long time when we were living in Los Angeles, and he just he was defeated and always got lost. Always lost. Then something snapped, and he turned it on, and he beat everyone. It was awesome. It would be great if he hadn't wrestled in the Olympics, but that didn't happen. But it's kind of like that. Maybe the guy just kind of given up. And Jesus tells him, stand up, pick up your mat, and walk. Now, I think it's interesting because this guy seems to be completely clueless, isn't he? Isn't he? Yeah. I mean, he doesn't seem to potentially or particularly have any faith. Like last week, we talked about the story, Jesus healing the official's son, and he had some sort of faith or belief when Jesus said, hey, it's going to be done. He kind of believed it and went on and found out that his son was healed. But in this case, there's like absolutely no faith that we see. The guy's just kind of frustrated laying there, and he doesn't say, because your theology's so good, because you only listen to, Hillsong and Bethel music, or, he just picks this guy randomly out, it seems, and heals him. And it says this in verse 9. Instantly the man was healed. He rolled up his sleeping mat and began walking. But this miracle happened on the Sabbath. So the Jewish leaders objected. They said to the man, who was cured, you can't work on the Sabbath. The law doesn't allow you to carry that sleeping mat.
What? Wait.
I'm glad you understand the absurdity of this. You have to remember, the Sabbath was given by God as this time of rest.
Right.
But there's all kinds of Sabbath laws that then develop about what work is. Like the Bible doesn't say, if you're paralyzed and someone heals you, you can't carry your mat. But it gets into these interpretations. So you have to go things like, there's a debate, can I pick my nose on the Sabbath? Is that considered cultivating? Maybe if you eat it, right? I don't know.
Oh, man.
And there's there's modern day things. I know a lot of people want to bring back the Sabbath. They talk about wanting to we should have the Sabbath. I think it's a great principle of rest. We did a sermon on that a while back. But you have to worry about things like if I press a button for an elevator, have I created work? And so they have Sabbath elevators that either stop every couple of floors or every floor, because you can't, if you're in Jerusalem, press the button. Or you can ask, depending on which rabbi you follow, you can ask the Gentile next to you to press a button. But you can't, and there's a question over that too. And it's, the Pharisees are, like the religious leaders become these kind of like hall monitors. Mm-hmm. And so the guy, they're like standing there like, wait, you're carrying a mat. Now this is crazy. The guy for 38 years laid there. Mm-hmm. I mean, certainly they recognized the guy.
Right.
And it'd be like if we were, outside today, if we went up to Lockerman Street and we were praying for someone and, we prayed for someone and they got out of their wheelchair. And you're like, hey, you need to get that off the sidewalk. Don't leave that there. It's just insanity of kind of following the letter of some things, and it wasn't something that was actually forbidden in the law, but we religious people, and we tend to be that way too. We add extra things, don't we? There were 613 laws, if you count them the way certain people do, in the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't enough for really religious people. So they added more, and so they see this guy, and they aren't excited that he got healed. They're just mad that he's carrying a mat. In 38 years, you should be excited for this guy.
Right.
But he replied, the man who's healed, the man who healed me told me, pick up your mat and walk. Who said such a thing as that, they demanded. And the man didn't know, for Jesus had disappeared in the crowd. See, Jesus pulled like a Where's Waldo thing. Yeah. He heals him. And Jesus is like a ninja. He's the healing ninja. He's boom, boom, heal. And then take off. And so this guy just didn't know. He's probably so excited he got healed.
Yeah.
And Jesus kind of just slipped away. And it says, but afterward, Jesus got in the temple and told him, now you are well, so stop sinning or something even worse may happen to you.
Oh, wow.
Then the man went and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who healed him. He kind of narcs on him. And then stop sinning. Now this almost sounds like the guy was the way he was because of sin, doesn't it? But I don't think that's what Jesus is saying. He's saying something more like, there's something even more scary than physical illness. Because eventually we all have to stand before God and account for our lives.
Right.
And he's saying, hey, just stop sinning. Your life needs to change. And really, Jesus constantly called people to follow him because that's where life is. And Jesus came so that we could choose life and have freedom in him. And so the Jewish leaders began harassing Jesus for breaking the Sabbath rules. But Jesus replied, my Father is always working, and so am I. So the Jewish leaders tried all the harder to find a way to kill him, for he not only broke the Sabbath, he called God his Father, thereby making himself equal with God. I think a lot of times when I've talked to people, they're like, well, Jesus never actually said he was God. If you look at the scriptures, if you look at the New Testament, now you can reject him and say he's not God. I don't want you to. but he definitely, he indicates that that's his belief, that's what he says. People don't try to kill you just randomly.
Right.
Definitely not. But they're trying to kill him. They want to get rid of him because they think he's, blaspheming. They think he's saying he's God when he's not. And so we kind of have to understand that culturally when we read this. And so Jesus, he says in verse 19, he explained, I tell you the truth. The Son can do nothing by himself. He only does what he sees the Father doing. Whatever the Father does, the Son also does. So the Father loves the Son. The Father loves the Son and shows him everything he's doing. In fact, the Father will show him how to do even greater works than healing this man. Then you will be truly astonished. Verse 21. For just as the Father gives life to those he raises from the dead, so the Son gives life to anyone he wants. And Jesus came to bring life. Let's skip down to verse 24. So I tell you the truth. Those who listen to my message and believe in God, the God who sent me, have eternal life. Jesus came so that we could have life.
Right.
I often quote John 10:10. Jesus said that the thief comes to steal and kill and destroy, but I come that they might have life and have it to the full. What the man was trying wasn't working, was it?
Right.
And I think a lot of times, often what we're trying to give us life doesn't work, does it? We're created to live a different kind of life than we often choose. We're created to live better. We just stumble and fall. Has anyone ever ridden a zero-turn mower? It's like every man's dream. I don't even have a yard. I want one. But I'll never forget the first time I rode a zero-turn mower. It was in the parking lot of a large place, and they had it, and they didn't really give me any instructions. They're just kind of like, you push it and it goes forward. Yeah. Well, they didn't tell me how to, where the brakes were, that kind of thing.
Pull back, you're good.
Anyway, let's just say I went crazy all over the parking lot. They thought I was having fun. I was just trying to figure out what I was doing, and then I couldn't figure out how to stop it, and I finally got into it. But it's kind of counterintuitive. You have to kind of push sometimes, you pull sometimes. And at first, you're kind of messing up. And you kind of tear holes in the lawn and different things, just trust me. But for quite a long time, we were playing in the church. I had to mow a lot of grass. And so I was on that thing for 8 hours a day. I became like an expert, because after a while, it made sense. And it was kind of a natural feel. But it almost seems counterintuitive when you first get on it. And that's a lot of times what following Christ is like, following Jesus. Sometimes when you start out following, it feels a little counterintuitive. Jesus always says things that we don't like. The big one, Jesus says forgive. He's all about forgiveness and reconciliation. I want to hold on to it. I want to hate. I think Jesus says, to love people. We want to keep our anger. Jesus says forgive. And that's hard. And it's, Jesus says, hey, you think it's great that you haven't killed anyone, do not murder. But I say if you've, been angry with your brother, you've murdered him in your heart. And a lot of the ways and the things that Jesus calls us to are hard to do. He says go right, but I naturally want to go left. But it's really a better way of living. Now, a lot of you know Justin. I point to where people sit at the other services. So some of you know Justin, who's not there when I point. But Justin Sybil did a post this week, and I got tagged in it, so I kind of stumbled on it. And it was this theological discussion. And Justin posted something to the effect of we shouldn't do things and serve God out of compulsion or obligation, but it should be something out of our free will and our desire to serve Him. And I loved the post, but someone in it argued, and I'm not criticizing them, but they argued, a lot of people serve God because they feel like they have to, like it's I have to do this. I don't really want to live this way, but God called me to live this way, and it's kind of if it's God's universe. He can do what he wants. And to some degree that's true because, God did create the universe.
Right.
And so it's his rules, his way of living that we're called to live. And sometimes we don't feel like we want to, but I think it's a lot like the rules of your parents. Now, for those of you who are still at home, you may think your parents' rules are terrible. And at times they curtail your freedom. And there were a lot of things I wanted to do when I was younger that my parents' rules wouldn't allow me to do. Now, you can go back and you argue maybe some weren't good, some, I'm an adult now. But really, a lot of their rules kept me from making mistakes and doing things that wouldn't have brought me life like I thought it was going to. I thought, hanging out with my friends all night would be a good idea. They gave me a curfew. And there's a lot of other things, I won't go into detail, I'm sure you can figure those out, things that I thought would be a good idea, but they had the wisdom to say, no, that's not a good idea. And that's the way it is with God. God has rules. He has a way of life. But it's not because he wants to hurt us, not because he wants to injure us, not because he doesn't want us to have a good time. It's because he wants to truly give us life. Now, those of you who have cars, when you get a car, it comes with a little manual. If it doesn't, you can download it now. And it tells you things like you should change your oil. Now, it's $3,000, $5,000, $10,000, depending on your car. Now, has anyone ever not changed their oil?
Yes.
Has anyone ever had then the result of not changing your oil?
No.
Now, so you might think, that manufacturer is curtailing my freedom. I don't need to change my oil. I'll change my oil when I want to change my oil. In fact, instead of putting oil in there, I'm going to put water in because it's cheaper. Or, you could have all kinds of things like that, and it would be ridiculous. Because the people who made the car should have some idea of the way it should be run. And it's the same way with our lives, though. Because often in our lives, we kind of have our own idea of how things should go. God gives us other plans, other ways of living, not to injure us, but because God created, he knows, he created us, he knows the best way for us to live. I keep that line in this story, it always struck me, is, do you want to get well? And I think it's a lot like, I've had a few sports injuries. I have a punch card for orthopedic surgery. The next one's free. I've had a few surgeries for complications, and the one that's giving me the most trouble right now is my knee, which I think I've had it operated on 3 or 4 times. But honestly, I don't even think much about it. But when the weather's pretty rough, and I'm in the gym trying to work out, and it doesn't want to work, or I get up. A lot of times, if I'm sitting down, if perhaps I was sitting somewhere drinking coffee, I sometimes have to explain to the person next to me, I'm not creepily standing here. I'm just waiting for my knee to work, because it takes a minute to kind of start tracking, so I can walk across the room and get more coffee. And honestly, I don't think about it much anymore. I don't think about trying to make it better, which sounds crazy, doesn't it? If you had a knee like that, wouldn't you think, go get it fixed?
Yeah.
But for me, it's like I've had it so long that way, I've kind of just gotten used to living my life that way.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that's how it is with things in our lives that don't work the way they're supposed to. We don't live the way God wants us to, but we get used to it. And we just think that's the natural way to live. But God has so much more for us. He has a way of living that gives us life. He has a way of living that won't cause us to limp anymore. I think it's interesting. All this stuff happens at the sheep gate. Did you notice that? We talked a little about the sheep gate. And you probably didn't think much about the sheep gate. You're like, okay, why is there a sheep gate and a fish gate and all this? And I started thinking about, why by the sheep gate? And started thinking about some other things in the book of John. If you were to read the whole thing, in John chapter 1, John the Baptist, he wasn't a Baptist, but he baptized people. So that's... John the Presbyterian, I don't know. Presbyterian people, I don't know. But he was the Baptist, so he baptized people, and Jesus comes on the scene, and he was the precursor to Jesus coming. And so Jesus comes, and John sees him, and he goes, "Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world." And it's this foreshadowing too of looking at the fact that Jesus came and he lives the life that we couldn't live, and he's the sacrifice for our sins. Spoiler alert, Easter.
Yep.
And you know, Jesus also said in John 10, and we're going to get into this a little more later, and Jesus said, I am the gate. You know, I'm the way in and out. And, you know, of the sheepfold. And, you know, it's, you know, when you follow Jesus, when you live by his rules, it's this way to new life. It's this way to eternal life. And it's a better way of living. When we accept the gift of salvation and we live his way, not our way, we will truly have life.
Amen.
As the worship team comes back to